Today is a huge day for the channel because I am bringing you my first ever 2-round mock draft. This is going to be a what I would do mock draft, so do not be surprised when players go earlier or when players go later than they're expected to go on draft day, because this is not a predictive mock. And really the 2 rounds just allows me to play a bit more strategy into the mock draft as a whole. I can draft a different position in the second round and target maybe a BPA in the first round. So without further ado, let's get into it, and we have the Tennessee Titans on the clock. And I'm not going to stray from consensus here. I do think that there was a point where you could justify not drafting Cam Ward, but I do think that ultimately, given where the team is at now, with not making any real moves in at the quarterback position in free agency, this is the smart pick. Is he a QB1 in other draft classes? No, but it's this draft class we're drafting in, and Cam Ward is worthy of the first overall pick in albeit a weaker quarterback class. Now the Browns are on the clock. There's no way in hell I'm drafting Shedeur Sanders here. And I don't think that will happen on draft day, actually, when it's all said and done either. So it's a question of, do I take Travis Hunter or do I take Abdul Carter? And I think the thought of pairing Abdul Carter with Myles Garrett really is talking to me. I know they do need a cornerback, and I know they also need wide receiver, though. The Browns need talent. So you know what? Let's go with Travis Hunter. I think Travis Hunter is the most talented player in this draft class. He can genuinely play cornerback and wide receiver. I can't believe we got to a point in the Heisman discussion where people were genuinely saying that Travis Hunter was just a snaps merchant, that he was an average cornerback and an average wide receiver. This guy is a fantastic wide receiver and an elite cornerback. And for the Browns, he'd play both positions. Maybe more wide receiver, to be honest, looking at their needs on the depth chart. But we're on the Giants now at 3, and they're in a bit of a pickle here. I think ideally the Giants want Travis Hunter, and Abdul Carter's the best player on the board here. They don't need an edge, but I'm just really not moved by Kayvon Thibodeaux. Yeah, he had 13 sacks in his second year. He had a 14.2% pass rush win rate last year, but that's only good for 42nd, slightly above Chase Young and slightly less than Marcus Davenport. And I don't think either of those two guys will stop you from upgrading the edge position either. They do need offensive line help pretty badly. I think you need to... Evan Neal is simply unplayable at this point, but he's a guard, and I think you can get that later. But then, someone like Amar Membu at tackle would really help this team, and it is early, and Abdul Carter is on the board. So for me, I'm torn now between going offensive line with the likes of Amar Membu or maybe even a Will Campbell, or Abdul Carter. Am I going for the talent or am I going for the need? You know what? I think we can... Let's take Abdul Carter. Let's take Abdul Carter. I think you can't pass up on a talent like Abdul Carter. Yes, there's overlap with the Brian Burns and the Kayvon Thibodeaux. I'm fine with leaving Thibodeaux. We can look to maybe trade him on draft day. We can have him as a rotational piece. It doesn't really matter. I think Carter has the highest ceiling out of anyone in this class. Potentially could be the likes of Micah Parsons. And the Giants, when they were their best as a team, they had an insane defensive line depth and rotation. And look, if we learn anything from the Eagles, don't draft for need, draft for talent. Now, the Patriots at 4. I really do not love their wide receiver room. Diggs, now coming off an injury, getting older. Kayshon Boutte, again, not fantastic. Demario Douglas is a nice slot option. You've got Baker, Polk, and Hollins. That's just an aggressively mid receiver core. But you can get a receiver later in the draft. I do love Ted McMillan, and I do have him as my clear wide receiver 1. But I do like what you can get in the second round, which is why we're doing a 2-round mock draft. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to draft my number 1 ranked tackle in Will Campbell. And simply put, yes, he's got shorter arms. Yes, he's got a shorter wingspan. That is obviously a concern at a position like offensive line. But fundamentally, he's survived with those arms at left tackle his whole career, which has been fantastic over 3 years now at LSU. Yes, he did take a step back in play this year, but fundamentally, I think we're getting a really sound player. Worst comes to worst, we're getting a fantastic guard, but I would draft him to start him at tackle. And the Patriots need a left tackle. They have right tackle and right guard sorted. They need left tackle. Will Campbell plays left. I'd sleep pretty soundly at night as a GM for the Patriots, knowing that I drafted a damn good player in Will Campbell, who is going to be starting on my offensive line for years to come. Now, the Jags at 5. They need a wide receiver, and this is what I would do mock draft, and and Tetairoa McMillan is really calling my name here to pair him up with Brian Thomas Jr. But they do also need interior defensive line. See, again, I can get wide receiver later. I don't really think I can. I could also get interior defensive line later. I can't get a player like Tyler Warren later, though, I think. So you know what? Let's go with Tyler Warren. And again, my thought process here with that pick is, yeah, I have Mason Graham higher and I have Tetairoa McMillan higher. On my big board, I think they're literally all next to each other. Let me just double check. I have, to be fair, McMillan's my third overall player. Mason Graham is my fifth and Tyler Warren is my sixth. But again, it's that understanding of where the strengths and weaknesses of this whole draft class lie. I think after Warren and Loveland, the tight end class falls off a cliff. And I think you can get a decent interior defensive lineman in the second. You can get a good wide receiver in the second, and really beyond that. And Tyler Warren kind of is a pseudo wide receiver anyway, in the mold of kind of like a Brock Bowers, Rob Gronkowski-esque in that sense that a tight end can be your really a fantastic receiving threat. Now the Raiders at 6. This could be where McMillan comes off the board for me, I think, with the Raiders. Looking at their team needs, they have obviously signed Geno Smith, so the quarterback's off the board. Thankfully, that really puts them in quite a strong position. They've obviously got Brock Bowers. I do like Jakobi Meyers. But after Jakobi Meyers, there's not really another receiver to speak of. And again, running back, I can get a good running back later in the draft. Cornerback, yeah, you can't. Those aren't found 10 a penny. But look, considering that my head coach is... Who's Pete Carroll? Considering my head coach is Pete Carroll, who is no spring chicken, I think he's the oldest quarterback, or the oldest coach in the league. I need someone that's going to make my team better now, and McMillan is going to do that. And with McMillan, Bowers, and Jakobi Meyers, and we'll draft a running back later potentially, I'm loving that. Now the Jets got scuppered there by the McMillan drafting. They need cornerback, the interior defensive line, a tackle. I think Mason Graham is a really good player. But looking at where this team is now, they've signed Justin Fields as kind of that bridge quarterback. They've got Oli Fashanu. I would have drafted McMillan here, but he's gone. I'll get another wide receiver later in the draft. I think I'm going to go with offensive line here, because I think the Jets are in a really interesting position where they can have Oli Fashanu at one side, they can have Aman Membu at the other side. Spoiler alert, that's who I'm going to draft now. And that really sets them up to draft quarterback in the future. They're not looking to compete now. They're going through a complete rebuild, realistically. And going in the trenches is a really good way to go, because they take 1 to 2 years to really start to develop anyway. So I'm going with Aman Membu here. The Panthers. This team needs defense. This team needs defense. It is literally just JC Horn and Derek Brown. Yes, they also need a wide receiver. Lots of wide receiver needy teams, but I'm not drafting a wide receiver at 8 for the Panthers, given their defensive needs. I'm looking at Mason Graham, and I'm going to go with Mason Graham. Mason Graham next to Derek Brown is immediately one of the best interior defensive line combos in the league. They need a lot more. We need to look for edge probably in the second, I think. But we'll see when that comes around. The Saints. Now, this team really is in a interesting spot. I think they need a wide receiver next to Olave and Shaheed, both of whom kind of struggle to be that number one guy and also struggle to stay healthy. But I don't love drafting someone like a Luther Burden here. So we are going to look defensively. And I think what we're going to do here is we're going to draft a good player who I think is kind of being underrated at this point. And we're going to draft Will Johnson. They traded Marshawn Lattimore. They need to get younger at really important positions like cornerback. And Will Johnson, I think, is a corner that you can start to build your defense around. He can be that potential number one guy, a la Patrick Surtain, potentially. High praise, I know, but that's kind of the mold of cornerback that Johnson is in physically and talent-wise. So we'll see if he does become that. Now, the Bears. What are the Bears going to do here? So we've obviously got Ben Johnson as the new head coach. We've completely retooled our offensive line. Do we want to go for a kind of a defensive lineman, or are we just going to go all out on offense? I really am not a DeAndre Swift guy whatsoever. So yeah, you know what? I'm going to go with Ashton Jeanty. It's high. I'm not usually a running back guy. I do like a bit of positional value in my mock drafts. But Ashton Jeanty with Rome Odunze, with Caleb Williams, with DJ Moore, that is and with a new offensive line and Ben Johnson, I mean, that is what you want as a Bears fan, right? And also, it helps out Caleb Williams. If you've got a better run game now with a good offensive line, that you can actually kind of draft a player like Gentry and not just expect a running back to suddenly improve your run game, which is to some degree quite dependent on the offensive line. It makes a lot of sense, I think. Now the 49ers, they have been gutted. This roster has been gutted with the looming contract of Brock Purdy, who's going to be paid, like $50 million, something like that a year. So I think this has to be a trench player. And I think I'm going to go with either Kelvin Banks or Josh Simmons. I'm going to go with Josh Simmons here, I think. I'm going to go with Kelvin Banks. I think Kelvin Banks fits the scheme better. I have Banks ranked higher than Simmons as well on my big board. I think Banks is a player that I think is being slept on, really, compared to the consensus. I really like Banks. At one point, he was a top 10 player for me. I have kind of settled on him a bit more now, but I think Banks is a really good player. And fundamentally, the 49ers need a Trent Williams replacement eventually. Colton McKivitz needs upgrading, and who's playing left guard? So really, you've got 3 question marks on the offensive line. Banks can play inside, play outside. I would obviously start him at tackle. I think that's where you're getting the most value out of him. But he can play inside if you need him to, and really just get your best 5 offensive linemen out there. Right, now the Cowboys at 12. I think wide receiver is a big need for this team, considering CeeDee Lamb had his worst year because he was literally the only viable receiving threat on this offense. But they also need edge. DeMarcus Lawrence has now left the team in free agency. At edge, the players that I'm looking at here would be someone like a James Pierce Jr. or a Donovan Ezaraku, but I kind of think it's a little bit early for those guys. I'm not going to lie. So do I then go with a Luther Burden, who I'm not mad on myself, but he is my 17th ranked player. I do have Ezaraku at 14 and James Pierce Jr. at 12. I'm going to go with James Pierce Jr. I'm going to go with James Pierce Jr. again. I think I can get a kind of a second option later in the draft, not even in the second potentially. But I really like James Pierce Jr. I think the talent is absolutely there. There's kind of concerns around his character. I can't speak to those. I don't know about them at all, so I can't factor that in here. I'm going to go James Pierce Jr. at 12. Now the Dolphins, this is a sprint the card in pick, really, and it really wouldn't shock me if they traded up. But this is Josh Simmons. They absolutely need to get better on the offensive line. They need to protect Tua, who obviously has a significant injury history at this point, and they need to get better at running the ball in short yardage situations. And Teron Armstead has retired. So offense, it really wouldn't shock me if on draft day we saw the Dolphins be aggressive and try and trade up, because you never know where the offensive tackles go. Now the Colts, I'm thinking about 2 players here for the Colts. I'm thinking about Colston Loveland. I know, tight end for the Colts. We've all been there, but they need a tight end, and Colston Loveland's a really good one. Or I'm looking at Jihad Campbell at linebacker. And I think Campbell's a better player on my board, but I think to see what you get out of Anthony Richardson with another receiving weapon in Loveland, who massively upgrades a position of need for you, it's a bit early for me. I do have Colston Loveland ranked in the 20s, but it's about team need, it's about team fit, and I think it's a bit of a force multiplier with Anthony Richardson. If he can't get it done now with all of these weapons, then you know he's not the guy. Welcome Daniel Jones. So Colston Loveland it is. Now the Falcons, again, I would look at Jihad Campbell here, but this has to be an edge rusher. Has to be. Because they have no one who's going to be able to pressure the quarterback. I'd like Mike Green or Donovan Ezaraku here. I think Green is more of that alpha. I think Ezaraku's more of the technician. So I think, considering the current state of the Falcons' offensive line, I'd go for the alpha potential over the technician. So I'm going to go with Mike Green here. And hopefully the Falcons can finally have someone that can actually properly and repeatedly continue to pressure the quarterback. Now the Cardinals at 16, they did a great job in free agency. Defensive line added Josh Sweat and Dalvin Tomlinson. They're getting BJ Ojolari and Darius Robinson back healthy, so they don't need to go defensive line, but you might want to bolster that. And then also we do have the guard options to really help Kyler Murray. And this is going to get quite ugly for some teams later in the draft here, because if I do go with Gray Zabel, which is what I'm leaning towards, Seahawks, Texans, it's looking ugly for you guys. Anyone else? Cornerback, defensive line. I think I've done enough of the defensive line. We're going to go as Grace Abel here. He's my number one ranked interior offensive lineman. Played tackle at North Dakota State, but he will kick inside. Killed the Senior Bowl from both guard and center. I'd have him at guard. He hasn't really got used to calling protections at center, I believe. So I would definitely play him at guard. And the Cardinals have 2 good tackles already. And adding Grace Abel will really help solidify that offensive line. Now the Bengals, this has to be a defensive player, and it has to be defensive line. This is a good spot, I think, for Donovan Ezeraku, personally. Again, he's that technician. He's got a great stable of pass rush moves, just understands the position really well. I think he's a great complement to Trey Hendrickson, who can be that number 1 guy, led the league in sacks and pressures last year, so he's definitely the number 1. And Ezeraku as a 2, I think, is a really good complementary option. And this team just needs to hammer the defensive side of the ball because it is bereft of any real talent. Right, now the Seahawks. Seahawks are in trouble here. The Seahawks are in real trouble here. They got Sam Darnold, who is a nice quarterback. Don't get me wrong, I think he's being underrated based on how the season ended for the Vikings and how it ended for Sam Darnold. But he's really susceptible to interior pressure. And it's a bit early for a Donovan Jackson, I think, despite him being a really solid player. It's at 18, that's eye-wateringly early. I think they could slyly use a defensive tackle as well. I know they have Byron Young, but they don't really play him in the same way that they might need another defensive tackle. Or they need an edge as well. They need a movable chess piece for Mike McDonald's defense. Oh, the Seahawks, what are we going to do with you? And they need an outside wide receiver because they got Kupp and JSN, who are both slot guys and aren't deep running back. Running backs aren't deep wide receivers anyway. They don't threaten the deep area of the field particularly. So we're in a pickle with the Seahawks here, guys. I'm going to level with you. We're in a pickle with the Seahawks. Yeah, so looking at the depth chart and looking at what's on the board now, I'm not going to draft for need for the Seahawks, despite them really pigeonholing themselves into having to draft for need. They could definitely be a trade-up option to try and land one of the offensive linemen, like a Grace Abel, potentially, if they're worried about the Cardinals. But I'm going to go with the defensive side of the ball here, despite that not being a need. But I do think that someone like a Malachi Starks or a Jihad Campbell in Mike McDonald's defense would work really well. I'm going to go with Starks here, to playing that free safety role, replacing Julian Love. He can play in the slot if Devin Witherspoon wants to kick outside again. So I think Malachi Starks to the Seahawks, I love the fit, and I know that McDonald is going to know what to do with Starks. And for me, Starks is a top 10 player in this draft. He's my 10th ranked player. So I think he's a fantastic talent. And at 18, we're getting great value on that. So I've gone for BPA for the Seahawks, which is pretty rogue because, look, and every team wants to be able to draft the best player on the board, but not every team puts themselves in a position to be able to do that. And ironically, the Seahawks are one that hasn't been able to, but that's what happens in the draft. You know, you can't control what the players that go ahead of you. Now, the Buccaneers, they need defensive back. They need an edge. And I think people will like a Jay Barron there, but I'm going to focus on the edge. I don't mind their secondary. Like Tyke Smith from Georgia they took recently, and Jamel Dean, Zion McCollum, Izzian as well. I quite like that. So I'm going to go with edge here. And we're going to go with the Michael Williams. Now, Michael Williams, I think for me, I feel more confident about his projection than I do about Shamar Stewart, who since the combine, I've just been growing less and less confident about his ability to really piece it all together. And I think Brett Coleman's got in my head a bit here. He has this like meme that he posts when it's like, you know, how can he be a good pass rusher if he doesn't rush the passer good? And I kind of agree with that. And I've gone back and watched some tape, and I've seen him against Will Campbell, who, you know, doesn't have the best physical tools, as we well know, and Shamar Stewart, who does have the best physical tools, one of the best we've ever seen in the draft, but wasn't beating him in any really, really meaningful way. And this was in a year where Will Campbell did take a step back. So I'm really kind of thawing a little bit on Shamar Stewart, whereas with Michael Williams, he's similar, got loads of tools, but I think I've seen more from him that I feel confident taking him, especially at 19. And the Buccaneers need that kind of like alpha potential edge rusher next to Kalijah Kancey and Vita Vea. So I like that pick. Now, the Broncos are a really interesting team because everyone was hammering Colson Loveland to the Broncos, and understandably so, right? They didn't really have a tight end. They signed Evan Ingram, and that's not going to stop them from potentially drafting a tight end. But what I think the Broncos are in the perfect position to do is go best player available. And it would have been a Michael Williams, I think, because sneakily, they're losing both Zach Allen and John Franklin Myers next year to free agency potentially, so they might want to get ahead of that. But then looking at who's available, that could be a Shamar Stewart location. Then they could take him and stash him, essentially, which I actually quite like, to be perfectly honest with you. Like a team that doesn't need Shamar Stewart to be that guy just yet, can take a bit more time to develop and learn, play in a potentially better situation than he did at Texas A&M. Yeah. Look, again, it's not need. Don't get me wrong, it's not a need. So Broncos fans, don't worry. I'm not saying it is. But it future-proofs this team, and they add a talent that many people think is, we know, based on his physical traits, could be one of the best players in the draft. Hasn't put it together, but the fact that you already have 2 good defensive linemen still under contract for this year means you don't need him to put it together this year. So, the Steelers at 21. Obviously, quarterback. The risk is that they're going to draft Jalen Milroe because he's now attending the draft, which is crazy to me. I'm not going to do that, though, whatsoever. An outside wide receiver, potentially. We're getting into the wide receiver hotspot now, I think, at 21. They've obviously got George Pickens and DK Metcalf, but they do the same thing. But I'm not going to draft a slot guy here. Although an Emeka Egbuka or a Luther Burden would be a really nice pick. They do need a running back. It's at the moment it's Warren and Gainwell because they lost Harris. And defensive line, they're pretty thin along the defensive line, especially at defensive tackle. Hayward's turning 36. So looking at the Steelers' depth chart, I am going to go with Luther Burden here. They've got Calvin Austin in the slot. I think that can be upgraded. Yeah, they've got 2 good wide receivers now in George Pickens and DK Metcalf. You do need that kind of shiftier underneath guy. I mean, like at the moment, Pickens and Metcalf are very similar players running a kind of more vertical route tree from the perimeter. Put Luther Burden in the slot as that yak threat. That's quite a well-rounded receiver core. Now, the Chargers at 22. They need a wide receiver. I'm going to leave that, though. They need tight end. I'm going to leave that. This is a Kenneth Grant pick for me. He's fallen a lot further than I would probably have taken him. Kenneth Grant for me is, I think, my 13th ranked player. I absolutely love Kenneth Grant. He is really, really good. Yeah, Kenneth Grant is my 13th ranked player. And that Michigan connection with Harbaugh is obviously going to be there, obviously, as well with Jesse Minter, the Michigan defensive coordinator. Take this absolute rock in the middle of the defense. I think he's got really high potential as well. I absolutely love Kenneth Grant. Now, the Packers. This is where I'm going to go for a player that I love in Jaden Higgins. Now, Jaden Higgins for me he's 23rd, so exactly where we are now, obviously, with the Packers. I think he might even be 1 or 2 spots higher. I think that Higgins can be that ex-wide receiver, and that's what the Packers need. They have loads of wide receiver 2s, wide receiver 3s. You know, Jaden Reed, Christian Watson's coming off injury. We don't know about him. You know, he's had a serious injury history now. Romeo Doubs is a nice wide receiver 3, I guess, but like Higgins can be that alpha, and that's what the Packers wide receiver core needs. Are the Packers going to draft the first round wide receiver? Probably not. This is what I would do. Now, the Vikings. The Vikings are an interesting team with Flores' defense, obviously. What do they need? So, the Minnesota Vikings. Interior defensive line, an injection of youth, defensive backs here. Jahdae Barron here would be quite interesting, I think, with his positional flexibility. But he's not really a man guy, and I do feel like the Vikings run quite a lot of man coverage, so I'm not sure about Barron there. He's a pure kind of zone guy. But then, if we're looking for a kind of press, if we're looking for those man corners, then a Siobhan Ravel. It's pretty interesting there. They do need interior defensive line. Let's have a look at who's available on the interior defensive line. I like Derek Harmon. I'm going to go with a Derek Harmon here. Derek Harmon is one of the better pass rushers from the interior defensive line position, other than Omar Norman-Lott, who I think I will take in the second round at some point. But I think that Derek Harmon gives the Vikings real pass rush juice on the interior, and then hopefully Dallas Turner can also take some steps as well as the edge rush they took last year. Now, my Texans at 25, I mean, we really put ourselves in it. We need offensive line. And at 25, there's just no one. Well, actually, no, Josh Connolly. I mean, that's the thing, is that we've put ourselves in this position. We're going to have to draft Josh Connolly, I think. Is it a massive reach? Yes. Do I feel good about it? I feel horrific about it. But that's the position we put ourselves in as a team. So I think it has to be someone like a Josh Connolly. I'm not that high on him. I know people from like The Ringer are. I know like Nate Tice is quite high on him as well. I just don't really see that with Josh Connolly Jr., but I'm going to hope that those guys are right and not me. And frankly, again, we pigeonholed ourselves into having to do this as a team. It's just an ugly offensive line in Houston, let's put it that way. Now the Rams. They need a tight end, could upgrade from Higbee. They also need a tackle, invest for the future. Although I do quite like Jihad Campbell here for them as someone that I think will go a lot earlier than this on draft day. But we are kind of seeing rumours now that he might fall into the second, which I struggle to believe. Campbell is the clear LB1, and I think he goes a lot higher than this when it's all said and done. It's just harder to work out what team will go for a linebacker as opposed to another position. Like I think the Falcons could, the Colts could, but they've gone with edge and they've gone with tight end respectively. So it really leaves the Rams at 26 wide open to sprint the card in for a fantastic player in Jihad Campbell, who is a 3-down linebacker, can rush the passer, make plays at the line of scrimmage. He can cover really well as well. Like, it's a fantastic fit at 26, let's put it that way. Now, the Ravens at 27, they need a wide receiver 1. I feel like they perpetually need a wide receiver. I like Zay Flowers, but he's more of a wide receiver 1.5. They need an edge, and they need a defensive back. I quite like Jahdae Barron here for them, I think. They've got, Ardarius Washington is fun, but, he's, maybe we want more certainty. TJ Tampa, maybe that's not what they're after, unless this is a Siobhan Ravel pick. Siobhan Ravel is a Ravens player, I can imagine. Just the way he plays the game, he'd be great opposite Nate Wiggins as that too. He's an aggressive press man corner. I think that's a really good fit. Now, the Lions, they need a second edge. They need a second edge, and let's see who is left on the board at this point at the edge rusher position. Nick Skoughton, not in love with that. Braden Swinson would be who I'd be kind of looking at here, but the value of edge, I think, has kind of diminished quite considerably here. Yeah, the Lions are in a really interesting spot here because I would have 100% gone edge, but the edge value really isn't there. Like Nick Skoughton would probably be in my next edge off the board, and then Braden Swinson, but that's I feel quite uninspiring. Then looking at the interior offensive line spot, it would be Tyler Booker, but that wouldn't be on my board. I do think he's a very Lions player, and he would upgrade the guard position massively. So I am going to go with Tyler Booker here. This is less of what I would do. I'm going to deviate from my rule. This is a less of what I would do pick here, more predictive, because I'm not that high on Tyler Booker whatsoever. He's in the 40s for me, I believe, Tyler Booker. But I can appreciate that offensive line particularly is about fit, and I think he works quite well for the Lions. Now, the Commanders, they kind of need edge rush, the Commanders. They also would benefit from having maybe another wide receiver, someone on the defensive line, running back as well. Now, we're in the Amari and Hampton range at this point, I think. But then they also need a cornerback. But then Barron's probably a really good fit, but Sainristil Still's already that nickel player. Well, they had him playing at like corner last year, which is pretty crazy. Who is left at cornerback? Because they obviously had Marshawn Lattimore, but he's kind of struggled to stay healthy. Trey Amos, Benjamin Morrison. I really like Jacob Parrish. Would I take him this highly? I don't think so. They need an edge, but there's not really the value here at this point. Neither really at cornerback for what they need. So let's go with the running back. Let's go with Amari Hampton as that downhill bell cow bruiser, 6'1", can, one of the better running backs after contact, has a lot of tread on the tires, but is really good. Now the Bills, they need someone that can play on the outside. They've got 1 million slot receivers. They've got Coleman, I think, is underwhelming as the outside guy. He had 5 drops, only 523 yards as well. And they got Shakir, Chenault, Kincaid, Samuel, all in the slot. So wide receiver is not like a need, but I could look to draft that here. They also, defensively, they need an edge to kind of help with Bosa. They need a defensive tackle. Daquan Jones is quite old. Cornerback, Dane Jackson's also quite old. So I think I'm torn between Jahdae Barron or Nick Skoughton as the edge. I do have Nick Skoughton is 29 for me, and Jahdae Barron's 31 on my big board. So there's not much in it there. It's kind of, what am I projecting Barron as being? Is he kind of going to be that He can play kind of outside corner, but more in a zone, with his eyes on the cornerback, with his eyes on the quarterback. He can play that nickel. He can play that kind of free safety role. Let's go with Jahdae Barron there, I think. Now, the Chiefs, they need offensive line help. And I think they also simply have to draft that. Now, Ariante Ursary, man, that is ugly. That is ugly. And Donovan Jackson, that is also ugly. But I don't think you're necessarily going to be able to get those guys later. Frankly, I mean, they pick next at 63, the Chiefs. So they don't necessarily have the advantage here of maybe being able to draft one of those guys later. But defensive line wise, considering, Chris Jones is no spring chicken now. He's 30. They need a bit more youth opposite George Karlaftis, I would say. Do they go with the defensive line? Do they go with a Nick Scouton here? Oh man, this is what's hard with these 2-round mocks. I've actually got to think about what they're going to do later. It is just so early for Donovan Jackson. I think he's a really solid player. I think he's more of a guard than he's a tackle. He's a massive reach for me at 31, absolutely. But the Chiefs lost the Super Bowl because they had a bad offensive line, fundamentally. Is that worth then overdrafting? It probably is. It probably is. I'm going to hold my nose and I'm going to do it. I'm going to go with Donovan Jackson. Ceiling, I'm not that in love with, but the floor, you're getting a player that can start at guard day one and can maybe be a swing tackle for you if you need him to, so he can start at tackle at a pinch. It's really ugly, but I think I just got to do it, considering the loss the Chiefs just had. That was ugly. That didn't feel good, guys. The Eagles. This would have been a big Jahdae Barron selection, I think. But if I'm channeling my inner Howie Roseman, obviously there's a certain Jalen Walker still on the board, but he's not a first-round player for me, guys. Jalen Walker is not a first-round player for me. And considering what they need in terms of their defensive back room, they cut Slade, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson got traded. They lost Milton Williams, Josh Sweat on the defensive tackle. Who we got at the interior defensive line? Walter Nolan, not a massive first-round player for me at this point. Who's left on my board? This could be a Nick Scouton. I think this is going to be a Nick Scouton at this point. Like, the value's there. They need edge. He can play that role, obviously. So I'm going to go with the Nick Scouton. So now we're on to the second round, and the Browns have the first pick in the second round. They took Travis Hunter to play wide receiver cornerback. And really, that's going to be where I'm going to continue to look, to be perfectly honest with you. We've got Emeka Egbuka is a really nice player now in the second round. I'm going to take Emeka Egbuka here and feel really good about that. He can now play Cedric Tillman. They've also got Jerry Jeudy and now Travis Hunter. That kind of frees. I want to put the Browns in a position to play Travis Hunter wherever they most need him. And I think him being that Martin Emerson replacement and then coming on for really important really important offensive downs, like red zone, third and long, third and short even, would be really good. So, Emeka Egbuka, top of the second. So the Giants are picking 34, and they obviously took Abdul Carter. And I'm going to keep looking at the defensive side of the ball here, I think, because that is still quite a big need, especially at cornerback. And I'm actually going to go with Azareye'h Thomas here, the cornerback from Florida State. I think he's really good as that kind of press man cornerback. He can play opposite Deonte Banks, that CB2. That really makes the Giants' defensive unit. They've got Carter, they've got Drew Phillips in the slot, they've got Deonte Banks at corner, they've got Tyler Nubin at safety. You've got a really good young core defensively, which is something to build around. Now the Titans, they obviously took Cam Ward. What are we looking at next with the Titans? A wide receiver, frankly, right? This could be the Matthew Golden selection. I'm just looking at my big board. Golden is more of a Z, and that kind of does overlap a little bit with Calvin Ridley, but Treylon Burks has just not been it whatsoever, and you need to give weapons to Cam Ward, I think. So the Jags at 36, they took Tyler Warren with the 5th overall pick. So I'm going to go with Walter Nolan here to bolster that interior defensive line. You've got Trayvon Walker, you've got Josh Hines-Allen on the edge. So having Walter Nolan on the middle will be really good. He's a bit of a raging bull, bit of a bull in the china shop. I think he kind of plays with his head on fire too much. But as a disruptor, he's a really good one. Now, the Raiders, they took, was it Tether McMillan? So they don't need a wide receiver. At this point, though, they do need a running back. They do also need a corner. Am I being a bit silly? No, the run game was so terrible. The run game was so terrible last year. I'm going to go with Travion Henderson, the running back from Ohio State. I'd also like to look to add a power back, maybe even in this same draft with Henderson. I want him in a split backfield, and I don't love any of the Raiders running backs to be able to do even that. Now, the Patriots, they went with Will Campbell in the first round, so we are going to look at a wide receiver here. Who is left? I really like Alec Iamano, and I really like Jack Besh, and I like Trey Harris. They also need a running back. Who's available at running back at this point? Dylan Sampson, Cam Scatterboo. But I think I'm just so underwhelmed by the wide receivers, and I want to keep adding to Drake May, and I don't think they've really got that outside guy. So on my board, who have I got? I've got Matthew Golden as my wide receiver 5, I think. Then I got Trey Harris. But I prefer Iamano, I think, than Harris, if I'm being brutally honest with you, despite them being one's 43 and one's 40. So I'm going to go with Alec Iamano here, the wide receiver from Stanford, to the Patriots. I know they drafted Polk, but I'm just going to keep hammering the wide receivers. I don't think Bootie's that good. I question if Diggs is really going to give you that much at his age, coming off an injury. And Iamano's not going to play in the slot, so it doesn't really matter for Demario Douglas. Now, the Bears at 39. What do we go with for the Bears with their first pick? We gave them Ashton Jenkins. They've gone running back. And I think now is definitely the time to look to add defensive help. Is this a Jalen Walker selection? I just don't know. Who's still available at edge? Let's have a look. If there's anyone that doesn't move me at edge. I quite like Braden Swinson at this point. I do also quite like Darius Alexander from Toledo. What we got on the defensive line, interior defense. Yeah, Darius. I'm going to go with Darius Alexander from the defensive lineman from Toledo to give that pass rushing juice. And the Saints, they took Will Campbell. So at this point, let's go with Jalen Walker here. Let's go with Jalen Walker here for the Saints. Again, I'm sure he's going to go much earlier than this on draft day. But for me, Jalen Walker is kind of a jack of all trades, master of none. That kind of like, at what point are you so positionally versatile that you don't really have a position? He's best as a QB spy. I like his traits, but he's a sawn-off, unproven edge rusher. But I think the Saints can kind of take a swing and see if that develops into something and just kind of bank on the talent. The Bears again. Wow, I should have seen that they were picking so soon. Is this Xavier Watts, the safety? Or is this Nick Emanwari? Let's go with Nick Emanwari, the safety, I think, here at this point. Actually, Makuba is my safety too. So I'm going to go with Makuba. I really like Makuba. I'm really high on him. I think he's so instinctual, got great range. Does have problems with missed tackles, but I think he's a really good player. I think he's being slept on. Now the Jets, I'm loving that haul for the Bears, by the way. Makuba, Darius Alexander, and Ashton Jeanty. I love that. Now the Jets, what did we go with the Jets with their first pick? We went with Amar Mambu as a tackle. So they now need a wide receiver along with Garrett Wilson. I said I would address it, and I'm going to. Am I going to go with a Jack Besh? Is that kind of, he can play anywhere, X, Z, kind of even in line as that kind of pseudo tight end? Would be a really nice compliment. I'm also looking at Carl Williams, but I think there's a bit of overlap there. And Trey Harris. Trey Harris or Jack Besh? Trey Harris or Jack Besh? I feel much more confident in Jack Besh's floor. I'm going to go with Jack Besh there. I really like that as a wide receiver too with Garrett Wilson. He can also move around. He's a really good blocker. He can be that kind of Puka Nacua player, which I think works really well. Now the 49ers, we had them going with Kelvin Banks. Yeah, so they've addressed their offensive line. Let's definitely look at defensive line, I think, now. Who do we have at edge? I quite like Braden Swinson at this point. A really kind of high floor power edge rusher. Let's do it. Braden Swinson, welcome to the 49ers. The Cowboys Got to keep remembering who we drafted. Sorry, the Cowboys, we went with the edge, James Pierce Jr. for them. Wide receiver here could be a play like Kyle Williams. Yeah. You know what? Hell yeah. I'm going Kyle Williams at 44. He is in my top 50 players, Kyle Williams. Where is he ranked for me? Kyle Williams is my 48th ranked player. So 44, him next to CeeDee Lamb would be so good. Like Kyle Williams is good after the catch. He's good in contested catch situations. He's, can play from the slot, can play out wide, helps with that CeeDee Lamb. He can play both, allow CeeDee Lamb to play in the slot if he needs to. I love that. Let me know in the comments if Cowboys fans, if you like that or not. And also make sure you subscribe for more draft content. Now the Colts, we had them going with Colston Loveland. And I know who I'm going with at this point. We're going to go with the linebacker. We're going to go with the linebacker, Carson Swessinger from UCLA. I think he's a fantastic player, really good at rushing the passer, surprisingly good at rushing the passer. He can make plays at the line of scrimmage, can trigger downhill really fast, is a bit like, can kind of get dominated a bit by offensive linemen, but as a linebacker in the second, can't get better than Carson Swessinger in my opinion. He would have been a great fit for the Falcons as well, having said that. We've already gone with the edge for the Falcons. Looking at the centers here, though, which is quite interesting. You've got like Tate Ratledge and Jared Wilson. It's a bit early for them, I think, though. Linebacker, I don't love. Who's left on the board wide receiver wise? Jalen Royals, it's a bit early. Xavier Restrepo, no way. Jalen Knoll, I have been Jalen Knoll pilled. And him from the slot? Look, why don't we recreate the Washington offense? You've got Kyle Pitts, you've got Drake London. They had 3 wide receivers in Washington. It's a bit early for Jalen Knoll. But YOLO. I said YOLO in 2025. Good grief. That was cringe. The Cardinals at 47. So we gave them, who did we give the Cardinals before? We gave the Cardinals Gray Zabel before. So they've addressed their offensive line. I think now at corner is what we're going to look at for them. And that's going to be a Jacob Parrish for me, looking at my board. Yeah, that's a Jacob Parrish. I love Jacob Parrish. You guys are too low on Jacob Parrish, let me tell you that. He's so aggressive, so feisty. I absolutely love him. He can play it off, he can play press. Mostly press, but he can play off coverage as well. I think he's a really good player. He's also a top 50 player for me. He's 47. Now, the Dolphins, we addressed their offensive line. I think we got to look to address the interior defensive line at this point. And who have we got on the board? Ooh, I do like Omar Norman-Lott, but it's a little bit early for him. Tyleik Williams I like as well. TJ Sanders. Cornerback, we got Trey Amos, which I think is probably the best value pick. So we're going to go with Trey Amos there for the value. So with the Bengals at 49, we've already given them Donovan Ezaraku. I'm still looking at the interior defensive line here, I think, just to continue to add some bodies to that. Frankly, TJ Sanders, I'm going to go with TJ Sanders just to continue to add some talent to that defensive line, which desperately needs it. Right. Now, the Seahawks at this point, they've also got 52. So they can kind of just afford to not burn one of these picks, but we have to go with an interior offensive lineman at this point. Yes, it's early, but we're gonna go with Jared Wilson from Georgia. Yeah, it's a reach, but I'm sorry, we got to take one of these players at some point. Now, the Broncos, we already gave them. Who is it that we gave the Broncos? I keep forgetting. It's actually really hard to remember, guys. Shamar Stewart. So we gave them the edge. We can kind of look now to continue to go best player available for the Broncos. Wide receiver, I quite like for them. Who's on the board still? This could be a Trey Harris pick because I think they need that outside guy. They lost Tim Patrick, lost Jerry Jeudy. They've kind of got Sutton, obviously. They've got Devon Vele, Mims, Franklin. They're all kind of wide receivers. I'm going to take Trey Harris here as that outside threat. Now, the Seahawks are back on the clock with 52. And we've given them, who did we give them in the first round? Was that Malachi Starks? We gave them Malachi Starks in the first. We've given them Jared Wilson, a reach, I know. But now we can kind of look at edge, I think. Who have we got left at edge? Landon Jackson, Princey Omar-Mielen. We're going to go with Princey Omar-Mielen here to help with that edge group. Now, the Buccaneers. Who did we give them? It's crazy how recently I did this and I just cannot remember. The Buccaneers, we gave them Michael Williams at edge. So we're looking at Xavier Watts here as that kind of... Let's go with Xavier Watts, the safety from Notre Dame. Now, the Packers at 54. We've given them, obviously, what's his name from Iowa State? Jaden Higgins. And I think now we can look to give them another cornerback, a Maxwell Hairston. Let's just have a look at who's available still at cornerback, because I think they need that. Benjamin Morrison. Benjamin Morrison's got first-round tape, but his injury really kind of makes that a question. So are you going to go for the risk with Benjamin Morrison, or are you going to go with the speed of Maxwell? I'm going to go Benjamin Morrison. I'm going to trust the tape and hope that the injury is not too serious. The Chargers at 55, we gave them Kenneth Grant, the defensive tackle. So now we can definitely look at wide receiver. And unfortunately, they've been screwed because there's no one here that you can take in the second. So is there a tight end? Arroyo's a bit... Yeah, I don't hate Elijah Arroyo there. I do think they need to upgrade the tight end position. I'm not that high on Fannin. He's definitely not a second-round pick for me. What else do we have? Running back? Yeah. Look, they do love the run game, obviously with Harbaugh and the offensive coordinator there. Who's left at the run back? They've got Harris. They got Najee Harris. Could they add a Dylan Sampson with the speed at that spot? It's a bit of a luxury pick they probably can't afford considering the fall off at tight end. So I will go with Elijah Arroyo at tight end there. Bit unproven, missed a lot of time due to injury, but really had a fantastic Senior Bowl and is a good receiving threat, potentially. And Lord knows the Chargers need that. Now, the Bills are up again. Who did we give them? I think we gave them an edge. Oh, no, we gave them Jahdae Barron there. Interesting. So then we're looking at corner. And we'll go Maxwell Hairston there to help them at cornerback. Now, I gave them... God damn it. I gave them Jahdae Barron and I just gave them Maxwell Hairston. So that's my mistake. I thought I gave them an edge. Maxwell Hairston is wrong. We're going to go with, let's pretend that hasn't happened. And we're going to go with who's available at edge then, just as like a rotational piece. We'll go with Landon Jackson at edge. Okay, so pencil out Landon Jackson, everyone. That's a Landon Jackson pick. Now, the Panthers, we gave them defensive help, and we're going to look to add that defensive side of the ball again. Is there anyone at wide receiver here? So that's the thing, is that the wide receivers have kind of gone now. And I don't love any of these guys at this position. So we are going to continue to look defensive line. We've already got an interior defensive line, so we don't need that. Can't draft Landon Jackson. He's gone. JTT, Demetrius Knight, Shamar Turner. Who do we have at edge? Let's have a look at edge specifically, because I think they do need edge. Ooh, Josiah. Let's go with JTT. Let's go with JT Tuimoloau there. Now, the Texans, we are, by the way, is anyone going to come back up for one of these quarterbacks? We're definitely in the quarterback range now. But I don't see, the Jets, I don't think they need it. Let's see. I think we can have someone come and trade up at this point for a what's his face? For a Shedeur Sanders. Who's going to come up? It's the Steelers. If they don't sign, let's work on the assumption that the Steelers have Aaron Rodgers. I don't really know if anyone is going to trade up to be perfect. I'm sure, because I think it's going to be more like that 2019 draft where all of them went in the third. You had Matt Corral, you had the Packers, we had Malik Willis. We thought all of those guys were going to go really early, and if the Steelers, do get Aaron Rodgers, then are they going to look to add a Shedeur Sanders now? I don't think so. Do the Rams have a second? Could that be I could see someone maybe for a Jalen Milroe, but none of these guys in the second. And is someone going to trade up? I honestly don't think so. I'm looking at the people that I've in the second now. Like, no, I don't really see it, guys. I don't see. I mean, maybe Sanders could have gone to the Browns at 33, but I don't see that being a good. I wouldn't do that. So no, I'm going to stick to what my guns here. Like I'm not going to trade up for Shedeur Sanders given what we've got at the moment. Like we've got the Giants. Maybe the Giants could. When is the Giants' next pick? 65. All right, we're gonna have the Giants. We're gonna have the Giants trade up here. They're just outside of they're at the top of the third round. They're going to trade up a few picks. We're going to trade back. It's lopsided. It doesn't really matter. I'm not really caring about the value here. I just think the Giants are. I think someone could trade up at this point. So we're going to have the Texans trade out of that, and we're going to have the Giants come and select Shedeur Sanders there. Now the Ravens at 59. Who did we give the Ravens before? Siobhan Ravel. I like that pick, if I do say so myself. Now, what are we looking at here with... Obviously, we've lost Landon Jackson. He's already gone. Defensive back. Guard. I mean, Cam Scatterboo is a Ravens player. And Derrick Henry is no spring chicken anymore. So we go with Cam Scatterboo. The Lions at 60. Who did we give them before? We went with the guard there before. So I think now we're looking at linebacker for this team, considering, again, the edge just isn't... The fall off at edge is pretty massive. Like, Jack Sawyer is such a Ravens player. He is. Lions player, sorry. And at 60, I don't feel bad about that value, to be fair. And as an edge too, would I rather have him or Josiah Stewart is the question for me. I'm going to go with Josiah Stewart here, actually, instead of Jack Sawyer. I'm not that high on Jack Sawyer, and I do think Josiah Stewart is a bit of a gem, actually. Like his, and opposite, and as an edge too, opposite Aiden Hutchinson, he's going to clean up. Now the Commanders, who did we give them? Who did we give the Commanders? All this scrolling, man. Omarion Hampton, we already did the running back. So now we can look at corner. Who do I have them needing at the Commando? Yeah, wide receiver, not really there, the wide receiver. We're looking at edge again. This, I think, I know I just said it, but it kind of does make sense now, is Jack Sawyer. So we're going to go Jack Sawyer there. He is, shorter, kind of got a high floor. What you see is what you get with Jack Sawyer. But I think in the 60s, I feel not too bad about that. Now, the Bills... Have they picked 3 times, the Bills? Am I losing my mind here? So yeah, they've taken Maxwell Hairston, which should have been Landon Jackson. So they've taken Landon Jackson, and they've taken... Who was the first one? And they've taken, bear with me, Jahdae Barron. So they've got edge, they've got... We can... Again, though, there's no outside wide receivers here. The wide receivers have all gone. There's no one there that I'm taking that early, so no, we're going to leave that. And they can afford to leave the offensive side of the ball, honestly. Let's go with Tylek Williams. Let's go with the value there. Now, the Chiefs, they've addressed their tackle need with a big reach. And we're looking now at defensive line. Who have we got on the interior at this point? Shamar Turner. I really like Omar Norman-Lott as that situational pass rusher. Next to Chris Jones, I think that'd be really good. So I'm going to go with Omar Norman-Lott, the best pure pass rusher from the interior defensive line position in this draft. And finally, the Eagles at 64. We gave them last Nick Skoughton, the edge. And who are we going to go with now? We're going to go with Maxwell Hairston. So I'm going to take Landon Jackson to represent Maxwell Hairston. So that is my 2-round mock draft. You'll see all of the picks to the side of me now. Let me know what you think of these selections in the comments. Do you like one of the players, neither of the players, both the players? Let me know down below in the comments, and make sure you subscribe for more NFL draft content. Only 2 weeks to go now to the draft, basically, and we're trying to get to 1,000 subscribers. So your report and and if you do subscribe, that is massively appreciated. But I've been your host, Dom Corbs. This has been Corbs NFL. I'll see you on the next video.